Mara stirred gravy into her mashed potatoes, while her sister detailed internship offers, and no one asked how the community pantry drive had gone. The clink of utensils and the muffled thrum of a football game hummed in the background as steam curled up from the green beans and cranberry sauce shimmered under the overhead light. Talia was recounting loud enough for the whole table the details of her interview with a marketing firm in Chicago. Mara seated 2 chairs down, carefully tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and focused on her plate. Earlier that morning, she'd stopped by Maggie's table for a warm muffin and coffee before helping unload donated canned goods at the pantry. Mr. Acker, the town's retired postmaster, had tipped his cap and said, "Still helping out at the pantry?" She'd smiled and nodded, brushing flour from her sleeve. The smell of cinnamon had lingered on her coat all day. Now, at the dinner table, Sylvia leaned in, smiling with bright eyes. "Oh, Talia, your new haircut really suits you, and that navy blazer so professional." Talia beamed, then launched into a recap of her first Zoom round with a startup based in Austin. Glenn nodded along, eyes warm, pausing only to pass the stuffing. Mara cleared her throat softly. The bakery raised enough.
"Last week they're installing the new oven at the senior center on Monday."
She waited, eyes scanning faces for a flicker of recognition, a nod, anything. Sylvia dabbed her lip with a cloth napkin. "That's nice, dear." Her voice was already trailing toward Glenn, asking whether the Cowboys were playing next. Talia's fork hovered midair. "Oh, did you hear they want me to help design their brand campaign? I might even fly out there in January." Mara offered a thin smile and tucked into her peas, the warmth of the room pressed around her like a thick quilt. It wasn't uncomfortable, just stifling in the way only familiarity could be. The brass candlestick in the center flickered with a hint of melted cranberry wax. Glenn reached for more turkey. Mara leaned back, folded her napkin neatly on her plate, and excused herself to the kitchen. The clatter of plates and silverware sounded louder in the smaller room. She let the water run warm before dipping her hands in dish soap clouded the sink as she stacked plates in slow, careful rhythm. The kitchen smelled like nutmeg and dishwater, a strange but comforting blend. She was rinsing the last casserole dish when Glenn stepped in. He leaned a shoulder against the doorway, arms crossed loosely.
"You okay, kiddo?"
Mara nodded without turning. "I'm used to it." He hesitated, as if considering a response, then simply gave a small grunt and turned back toward the living room. Later upstairs, the house settled into soft creaks and distant television noise. Mara sat cross-legged on her quilted bedspread, the same faded one from high school. The scent of pumpkin pie still lingered faintly on her sweater. She opened her laptop, its glow casting soft light against the pale blue walls. She wasn't expecting anything urgent, just the usual updates from student groups and campus alerts. Her inbox showed a few unread messages. One stood out. Subject Community Impact Award. Letter of recommendation. Received. Mara clicked. Submitted by Verna Holloway. She stared for a moment, rereading the line 3 times. The screen flickered slightly as her cursor hovered. A smile pulled gently at the corner of her mouth. Not wide, but sure. Recommendation letter, submitted by Verna Holloway, for Community Impact Award. The front porch creaked with age, but Mr. Acker's voice was clear as ever. "Young lady, you still sort better than any accountant I ever met." Mara chuckled as she adjusted her scarf, a cinnamon-scented paper bag tucked under her arm. "Cornbread from Verna," she said, offering it like a peace treaty. Still warm. Inside, the air was a cocktail of old cedar, boiled coffee, and a trace of liniment. The ceiling fan above wheezed into motion, pushing the smell deeper into the living room. Mara's sneakers made a soft thump on the linoleum as she stepped in. She didn't come here for gratitude. She came because Saturday mornings were hers, unclaimed by campus or calendar. And Mr. Acker's kitchen was where thermoses met stories, and time forgot its job. On the table lay 2 cardboard boxes filled with dry goods, some labeled in faded marker. She rolled up her sleeves without being asked. They worked in rhythm. Mara jotting inventory in her navy blue notebook, Mr. Acker rattling off brands like an auctioneer. 2 cans creamed corn, dented but proud. Mac and cheese mystery store brand, likely on sale. He squinted, then tossed the box aside. And this spaghetti sauce with a Best By date that's more of a suggestion. Mara smiled and scribbled, tucking her curls behind one ear. All accounted for. The old man settled into his chair with a soft grunt. You know, he began, voice flattening into something gentler. There was a time. Folks didn't think much of me. Didn't go to college. Wore the same coat. Winter to winter. He traced the rim of his coffee mug with one finger. But I kept books for 8 businesses in this town before you were born. Balanced, ledgers blindfolded. Mara looked up, caught his eyes. Light blue. Steady. Maybe numbers find the right people eventually. He nodded, pleased by that. A squirrel skittered across the porch railing outside. The sky was still low and pewter, the kind of overcast that made morning feel like evening. Mara folded the final paper bag and stacked it with precision. Beside her, the old pickle jar jingled with coins, a system Mr. Acker swore was more honest than any cash register. As she pulled on her coat, he reached into the inside pocket of his cardigan, fingers fumbling a bit. He held out a crumpled note. Friend of mine, he said. Elaine. Something. Church board. I think she's planning one of those town square things. Speeches, music. She's looking for voices that matter. Mara hesitated, then accepted the paper. You're the quiet kind, he said, settling back. But I always say it's never the loud ones who hold things together. It's the ones who show up early with a thermos and a plan. The floor creaked behind her as she stepped back into the gray morning. Leaves swirled along the curb like whispers. The sun never broke through, but something about the air felt clearer. Later that evening, Mara lay on her bed, one leg tucked under the other, balancing her laptop on a flannel pillow. Her inbox had a new message. Subject: Winter Voices event. Speaker confirmation. Nominated by Acker. Theodore. Mara stared at the screen, then reached for her thermos. Steam rose, fogging her glasses as she read the message again. The cake box smelled of nutmeg and pecans. But what caught Mara's eye was the envelope tucked beneath the wax paper. She blinked at it for a moment before reaching in, careful not to smudge the frosting. Her fingers brushed the thick paper warm from the oven's heat and pulled it free. The envelope was unsealed, folded neatly, the handwriting on the front, unmistakably. Verna's Mara Kessler. Private. This came for you, Verna said from behind the counter, brushing flour off her apron. But don't worry, it's not a bill. The bells above the door had barely stopped jingling from Mara's arrival, the sweet air still thick with the scent of cinnamon and warm butter. Outside, the trees lining Main Street clung to their last leaves, golden and reluctant. Inside, Verna's oven pulsed with the comfort of small-town rhythms, folks ordering pies for the church raffle, someone asking if the molasses cookies were soft-baked this week. Mara eased the envelope open and slid out a single page. Her eyes scanned quickly, then slowed. It was an official invitation to speak at the upcoming Unsung Voices Awards ceremony, her name listed as one of 3 finalists for Youth Community Impact. The signature at the bottom read, Elaine Mercer, Outreach Chair. But what struck Mara most was the small type in the corner, nominated by Acker Theodore. She read it again. From the kitchen, Verna watched without pressing. She simply set down a paper bag of mini loaves beside the register and said, "The pecan cakes for Mrs. Donnelly's daughter. Addie said you were the only one who stopped by after the stroke." Mara managed a nod, folding the letter into thirds and tucking it into her jacket. "I didn't think Mr. Acker—" Verna chuckled softly. "He remembers everyone who ever returned his library books on time. You went back every week with a fresh list and a half-eaten granola bar in your back pocket." A gust of wind caught the bakery's windows, making the bells chime again, as a woman in a heavy wool coat stepped inside. She looked around, then smiled upon seeing Verna. Her voice was gentle but carried. "Verna, dear, I'll need 2 of the honey oat loaves and 1 of those almond tarts for Pastor Tim's sweet tooth." Mara recognized her from the bulletin board at the pantry, the woman in all those fundraiser photos. Verna greeted her warmly. "Elaine, meet." Mara. Pastor Elaine turned, studying Mara with eyes both soft and discerning. "Ah," she said. "We've seen what you do, child. Sometimes the town sees more than the kitchen table does." Mara didn't reply. She nodded politely and offered a small smile, unsure whether to stay or go. Verna caught the hesitation. "Go on now. Just don't drop the cake." Outside, the sky had gone pewter. Clouds hung like brushed wool across the tops of rooftops, and the faint scent of chimney smoke drifted over the lane. Mara walked slowly toward the community lot, the letter still folded in her coat, resting like a secret. When she got home, the living room was its usual hive. Talia draped over the couch with her phone, Sylvia in the dining room, clipping coupons no one would use, Glenn sorting through mail by the door. Mara kept her steps quiet. She passed behind them all, heading for the stairs. The card sat warm against her side, the weight of it making her feel both taller and invisible. She slipped into her room and closed the door softly. Inside, the light from her small desk lamp threw a golden pool across the floor. She pulled out the letter, reading it again under the quiet hum. She didn't tell anyone. Later that night, curled on her side in bed, she reached for her phone to check the time and saw the glowing notification first. It was Talia's newest post. "Big plans coming. Launching my mentorship program soon." Mara stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she pressed the side button, and the room returned to stillness. She set the phone face down on her nightstand and clicked off the lamp. Mara turned off the phone. When Mara stepped onto the stage, the applause sounded distant until she heard a familiar voice whisper her name. The lights weren't bright, but they still felt hotter than she expected. She could barely make out the faces in the first row, but she knew Mr. Acker's silhouette by the tilt of his shoulders, and Verna's by the soft scarf draped over her blouse. Their smiles didn't shout. They steadied. Pastor Elaine had introduced her with a warmth that didn't need embellishment. Tonight, she'd said, "We recognize someone who helped feed over 200 families and never told a soul." Mara took a breath, the kind that felt too big for her lungs, and stepped forward. Behind her, the backdrop was a soft, gray curtain lined with black and white portraits. A retired teacher, a nurse from the old ward, a man who once organized the town's first food co-op. Their eyes, frozen in time, seemed to watch her now. Above them, in hand-painted letters, "Unsung Voices of Williamsport." Her voice when it came wasn't loud, but it held. "I didn't plan to speak tonight," she began, eyes scanning the rows without landing on anyone. And I wasn't sure I'd belong here, because I'm not used to being seen. The room held still. Even the toddler who'd been fussing near the back quieted. She continued. There's a man I visit every Saturday, Mr. Acker. He told me once that the people who hold things together aren't the ones who talk the loudest. They're the ones who show up with a plan and a thermos. I think he's right. A quiet chuckle rippled through the room, soft and understanding. I used to think I needed someone to clap, to know I was doing something right, she said. But now, I just want to do right, even if no one's watching. Someone sniffled. A woman in the second row dabbed her eyes. Mara's hands shook slightly as she turned the note card over in her palm. Not to read, just to ground herself. I've learned that sometimes kindness doesn't get a headline. It gets a bag of groceries to someone's doorstep before snow hits, or a ride to the pharmacy when no one else offers, or warm banana bread in a paper bag. She glanced toward the first row. Verna winked.
And that's enough.
That's everything, actually. A pause. Then the room slowly, steadily rose to its feet. No cheers, no fanfare. Just the kind of applause that comes when people recognize a truth they'd forgotten to name. At the very back of the room near the door, a man stood stiffly in a brown coat. Beside him, a woman clutched a crumpled tissue in one hand, and between them, slightly behind, stood Talia. Her lips pressed tight, mascara threatening to betray her. They hadn't been introduced. No one in the room knew they were Mara's family. Pastor Elaine returned to the podium, her smile touched with something proud and wistful. Sometimes, she said, the quiet ones change everything. The ceremony wound down with grace. Older couples came to shake Mara's hand, pressing her fingers in both of theirs. You remind me of my daughter, one woman said softly. Before we lost her, she was kind like you. A teenage volunteer from the library handed her a guest book to sign. Mara paused to write, not her name, but a note. Thank you for making room for people like me. Near the back table, the pecan cake sat unopened, a note pinned to the lid, reserved for Mara. With gratitude. Verna. She approached slowly, unsure of what came next. As she reached for her coat, a shadow fell across the floor beside her. Glenn stood there, hands in his pockets. His eyes looked unsure in a way she'd never seen. He opened his mouth, hesitated, then gently extended a hand toward her shoulder.
That was something else, kiddo.
They sat at Maggie's table diner, each with a mug of coffee. No one reached for the sugar. Outside, the Sunday morning rain misted against the fogged windows, blurring the view of Main Street's old storefronts and holiday lights. Inside, the diner smelled of bacon grease and cinnamon toast. A low jazz tune played from the jukebox in the corner, something sax-heavy and slow, like memory itself had a soundtrack. The four of them sat in the booth near the back, where the red vinyl cushions cracked if you shifted too quickly. No one had ordered yet. The menus remained closed. Mara's fingers traced the rim of her mug. Across from her, Glenn cleared his throat as if that might summon the right words. I kept waiting for some headline, he finally said. Some article, a newsletter.
Something to tell me what you were doing.
He paused.
But you wrote a legacy in silence.
Mara didn't flinch. She didn't need to. The silence didn't feel sharp anymore, just real. Sylvia tucked a stray napkin back into the holder. I thought she said, slowly. We were cheering for the one who needed it most. Talia was always louder, always reaching. Her voice dropped. Turns out we missed the one who deserved it. The server approached, gray hair in a bun, name tag reading, Lena and Sylvia smiled politely. Classic meatloaf, extra gravy, she said, not needing to look at the menu. Just like always. Mara smiled faintly. Some things didn't need to be said. Talia, sitting next to Glenn, held her coffee like it might shield her. You were doing all this? She said, and I was busy thinking, the world turned on likes and shares. No one said you couldn't do good things, Mara replied, voice even. You just did them loudly. I did mine differently. Talia set the mug down, both hands shaking slightly. Did I make you feel small? There was a long pause. Mara didn't speak. She just nodded. Slow, deliberate. It wasn't cruel. It was simply the truth. Across the diner, an elderly man in a tan windbreaker shuffled past their table on the way out. He tipped his hat at Mara and said, That award, about darn time. Glenn let out a soft laugh. You've got fans, kiddo. Mara smiled again this time with something close to warmth. Their food arrived, Sylvia's meatloaf, Mara's grilled cheese and tomato soup, Glenn's black coffee topped off. Talia picked at a waffle, more for motion than appetite. Conversation lingered in the safe places, the pantry's holiday food drive, how Mr. Acker still called raisins, nature's tax, the weather forecast. When the check came, Glenn reached for it, brushing off Mara's protest with a shake of the head.
Let me do this one.
They stood to leave the bell over the door, chiming softly. Rain still drizzled outside, coating the sidewalk in sheen. Mara turned back just as Glenn slipped something under the edge of her empty plate, a folded slip of paper. Later, when she found it, the handwriting was unmistakable. We see you now. Snow clung softly to the diner window as Mara poured tea into 2 mismatched mugs, Helen's scarf still draped on the chair. The tea was warm, fragrant with cinnamon and a hint of orange. Outside Main Street was blanketed in soft white, the kind that muffled sound and slowed time. Twinkle lights glowed across shop windows, strung with gentle sag between telephone poles. It was 3 days before Christmas, and Williamsport had never looked more like a postcard. Inside Verna's oven, the scent of fresh waffle cookies mingled with white bean soup simmering in the back. A worn radio on the counter played Sarah Vaughan's Lover Man, the notes curling into the corners of the room like smoke. Verna moved with slow precision behind the counter, ladling soup into paper bowls with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times and still cared about the shape of each scoop. Mara tied a ribbon around a stack of neatly folded blankets, fingers red from the cold. A row of gift bags waited on the bench by the door, each tagged for a senior in the community. She glanced at the list taped to the wall, checking off Mrs. Carver, lavender scarf, and Jules Bennett, sugar-free cookies. At a table near the window, Mr. Acker sat with a newspaper and a cup of black coffee. His scarf was slung over one shoulder, his posture more relaxed than usual. When Mara caught his eye, he raised his mug slightly. Approval in his language. Across the counter, Verna passed her a small, wrapped box.
Don't look at me like that. It's not a bill.
Mara chuckled and opened it carefully. Inside was a photo her on stage at the award ceremony mid-sentence. Hands folded, eyes steady, below it in Verna's careful cursive. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you lifted while you were here. Mara didn't speak. She didn't need to. The door opened with a gust of cold air, and Nico stepped in, stomping snow from his boots. He held up a thermos like a trophy. I brought extra. Figured you'd be here. Figured right, Mara replied. He handed her a folded letter with his uneven print on the front.
Inside, you told me to do good work. Even if no one claps. I get it now. Thanks for showing me how.
Mara folded it back with care and tucked it into her coat pocket. The hours passed with the kind of quiet busyness that feels like meaning. Soup was poured, Mittens handed out. An old woman cried when handed a blanket with her late husband's name embroidered in the lining. Mara didn't cry, but her chest ached in that way. Gratitude sometimes does. As the afternoon faded, she stepped onto the porch to catch her breath. Snow swirled around her boots, light and fine, like sifted sugar. The sky had turned that wintry gray blue, and the scent of pine hung faintly in the air. Behind her, the door creaked. "Coming to the soup line." "Miss Legacy." Mr. Acker called his tone, dry but warm. Mara turned, smiled. Sometimes the bridge you built for someone else ends up carrying you too. The snow fell gently outside Williamsport that December, but inside kindness moved like a quiet fire, steady, unseen, but warm enough to gather others. Mara never sought applause, only moments where doing good felt like breathing, in a world that often looks for loud voices. Hers reminded us that strength often whispers, like the glow of a porch light on a winter's night. A small act of compassion can guide us home. So, if this story lingered with you, maybe today's the day to let your silence speak in kindness